Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Singapore once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that's never featured on the channel before. Now, these guys are another relatively new addition to the Singaporean beer scene, but they've built up a very good reputation for themselves over the last couple of years. A lot of people have told me this brewery excels on the darker end of the beer spectrum, but for me, the really interesting thing about this brewery is that they do a lot of different styles, and pretty much all of their beers are modelled on different foods and desserts and things like that you'll find in Singapore. So there's a lot of different adjuncts in here and some really interesting flavours. So yeah, the beer we're going to have a look at today is one that I have actually tried from this brewery before. I tried it in one of the local Singaporean craft beer bars, but I was very keen to do a proper sit-down review of this one and just think about everything that was going on in this, because it was a very interesting beer actually. So needless to say, I'm really curious to try this beer again. Hopefully it's as good as I remember. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Singapore like I said. We are going to go to the Mandai area, which is kind of halfway across the island and to the north a little bit, and that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer on the channel from Sunbird Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Pulut Hitam. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Stout. So this particular beer is apparently modelled on an Indonesian dessert that is like a sort of gelatinous black rice porridge type thing. It has a bit of cane sugar in it, and it also has a little bit of coconut in it from what I understand. Unfortunately, I never got to try this dessert when I was down in Singapore. I was focusing mainly on the Indian food because I absolutely love it. But I did actually get to try this beer before, and I know that it's pretty damn nice actually. So yeah, let's just crack on with this one then and see how we get on. A big thank you, of course, to Clive at the brewery for making this review possible. These guys sorted me out with 6 cans of their beer in a glass before I left Singapore. I had to drink 2 of them, unfortunately, because I didn't have enough room in the case. But yeah, we've got 4 really interesting beers to look at from these guys over the next few videos, so keep your eyes peeled for those. But yeah, this I thought was a really good one to kick off with because I had tried it before. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future from Sunbird Brewing Company. Very first time we're reviewing one of their beers on the channel, as I mentioned, but definitely not the last. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Singaporean playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regular at the moment because I did bring quite a few beers back with me from there. But yeah, hopefully more to be added to that over the next wee while as well. But make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries too, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Sunbird Brewing Company for the first time. So Sunbird Brewing Company, as I mentioned to you already, are based in the Mandai area of Singapore, and the company was founded back in 2020 by Clive Tan. So Clive was apparently introduced to craft beer during his university days, and he was just shocked at how different craft beer actually was to the commercial beers. But this prompted him to start researching the science behind brewing and, actually to start home brewing for himself. But a while later, he was headhunted by Archipelago Brewing, and he became the youngest professional brewer in Singapore, despite coming from a background largely in financial and the financial sector and economics. But he also had a little bit of education background, if I remember correctly. But he says that he always had the goal of opening his own brewery within 5 years of joining the brewing industry. So after working at Archipelago for 5 years, where he was operating a 6-figure output, a couple of $100,000 1,000 litres, he decided to bite the bullet and start making plans for Sunbird Brewing Company. But apparently it took him about a year to get everything ready for the brewery, including the licenses, choosing the location, procuring the equipment and all this sort of thing. But the brewery was eventually launched in April of 2020, and unfortunately that was just when COVID was kicking off. But the brewery itself can be found in the Mandai area toward the north of the island, and over the years they've won a number of awards for their beers. And Clive is joined at the brewery these days by Mark and Liang and the brew team. They're operating a 10 hectolitre, 1,000 litre brew kit. Initially they sold the beers in bottles, but they transitioned over to these little 330 millilitre cans in 2022, and over the years they've gradually expanded the brewery's infrastructure, and they produced around 90,000 litres across 2023 from what I understand. But in late 2021 they opened up a tap room in the Ang Mo Kio area, which had 10 taps and sold burgers and rice bowls, but this unfortunately closed down after a wee while, mainly because of the effects of the COVID pandemic. It just wasn't really profitable for them. I think they lost a fair wee bit of money on that, but maybe, you never know, they might reopen it at some stage. We'll wait and see. But the Sunbird name is taken from the crimson sunbird, which is the national bird of Singapore, so that was why the tap room was called Crimson by Sunbird Brewing Company. But the output of this brewery has been fairly steady over the years. As of April 2024, when I'm producing this video for you, these guys have made 45 different beers according to Untappd, and like I explained to you earlier, many of their beers are based on different kinds of desserts and different kinds of foods and things like that that you'll find in Singapore. So yeah, I think that's everything we can really say about Sunbird Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at this beer then. I think we've put in a nice little history for you there. So yeah, you can see the artwork on this one is quite interesting, and I will say that the artwork on each of these Sunbird Brewing Company beers is quite different, I have to say. I think it's really quite nice. But yeah, there you can see Pulut Hitam. You can see the Sunbird Brewing Company symbol on the back of the can there, which I think is very, very nice. Plain silver top on this one, incidentally. It's a 330 milliliter can there, and it says best before the 30th of September 2025. But on the back here it says, infused with inspiration from a local dessert, Pulut Hitam is our Imperial Stout. Our Imperial Stout merges with the distinct flavours of coconut, gula melaka and black gelatinous rice. I'm guessing the gula melaka is some sort of kind of brown sugar. But experience roasted hints of coffee and chocolate, complemented by a rich and creamy finish. As I said earlier, this one I believe, does it actually state it on the can? Yeah, 10% ABV. So yeah, it says on the can this one is 10% ABV, 330 milliliters, but really nicely presented. I think you can feel the can is a little bit solid. So yeah, probably is just as well that we're drinking this one pretty soon after bringing it back from Singapore. The two of the other beers that I have are lagers. We've got one more Imperial Stout as well. The two that I had to drink, one was a tropical stout, which was very nice, and the other one was, I think it was a golden ale or a pale ale or something like that, actually. So yeah, we'll need to see about getting cans of those again when we go back to Singapore. But yeah, we'll do that in the future. But this looks very, very nice. So that head is going to disappear very quickly. So before it does, we can say, now that I've got the can facing the right way and my OCD is happy, you could see that when we poured this beer, it came out with a kind of 1/4 to 1/3 finger of a frothy, very dark tan head, and that has of course faded away to be pretty much nothing. There's just a little layer of foam around the edge of the surface of the liquid there. But overall, it looks pretty nice, this one, and pretty much what you would expect of any Imperial Stout. So you can see lovely sort of dark ebony rosewood colour to this one. If we shine the light through it, it does give you a wee bit of that sort of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge, and if we sugar it around, it's giving you a fair wee bit of lacing actually as well on the edge of the glass there. But yeah, this dark ebony rosewood colour it's certainly what you'd expect from an Imperial Stout. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put into the beer, can affect its colour as well. But with black beers such as the Imperial Stout, it really is quite difficult to affect the colour of the beer with different adjuncts. It's easier with the brown beers like Doppelbocks and Scotch ales and stuff like that. But yeah, when it comes to an Imperial Stout, there's kind of two ways that you can play with these a little bit. You can make them double mash, which gives you a big sort of sticky mouthfeel, which works on the kind of sweeter stouts, but you can also do a slightly longer wort boil and things like that as well, which gives you a more kind of leathery, complex sort of flavour with the brown sugars. So I'm curious to see what this one, how this one appears, because when I tried this before, I had a couple of beers already, so to try this one on a clean palate I think will be interesting too. But yeah, I do wonder about the double mash, considering the lacing that's quite visible in the glass with this one. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this beer. So let's have a little look at the aroma then and see what this one has in store for us. I'm really curious about this. Oh yeah, it's actually very savoury, but it's not savoury in the same sense as like a pastry stout. The aroma is actually very, very subtle in this one. Like it has it actually reminds me a little bit of the semla buns that we used to eat, you know, we'd eat in Sweden, the ones with the cream on the top. It really reminds me of that. This beer's got like this, you can smell the ricey character coming out of this. It's got this really smooth, slightly dry, but very oily, sweet rice character coming out of it. You can certainly smell like the sort of oat flaky, porridgey type character out of this beer as well. But yeah, it comes across as quite simple, but I think the way everything pieces together in this beer is really, really nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me on the aroma for sure. But yeah, let's try and take apart the aroma of this one and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer, you do get a tiny little hint of a roasty toasty, like well fired black malty character, but all in all, the aroma of this beer is very smooth. It has like an almost kind of chocolate sponge cakey type aroma to it. That's a lot of the stuff I'm getting. There's a little bit of woodiness in there, of course, within that kind of sponge cakey aroma that the beer gives you. There's a sort of you do get the kind of coconutty notes, a lot of vanilla, like I said. It almost, yeah, it has a little bit of that kind of vanilla creamy sort of note to it as well. It said on the can you should get a little bit of coffee out of this one, and you know, maybe there's like a tiny little bit of that, but honestly, the aroma that comes out of this beer is mainly like a sort of chocolate vanilla sponge cake for me. It really is very much like that. But like I say, you get the oaty, you can certainly get a kind of porridgey type character out of it. There's some nice sort of oily, ricey notes within the beer as well. It's a really, really interesting, yeah, it's a really, really interesting just mix of things, this one actually. Do I get some nuttiness out of it? Nah, more just coconut. Big sweet oily rice. There's a wee bit of like a sweet brown sugary note in this one, like a wee bit of bright caramel. It's not really treacle or molasses or anything like that. Yeah, the aroma of this one, it's very nice, but compared to other Imperial Stouts that I've had, it comes across as quite simple in a sense. It's actually really quite straightforward in a lot of ways. So yeah, like a chocolate sponge, bit of vanilla to it, a little bit of nutty character. The coconut comes out of this one for me. Good little bit of woodiness in the backbone. Bit of toasty brown sugar, wee touch of like sweet caramel or something, but yeah, quite a lot of sweet rice coming out of this beer for me. Yeah, aroma wise, this is really quite quirky. Even if we sugar it up, it doesn't show too much difference. It's just the rice. I think the ricey character that this one has becomes quite becomes quite poignant, becomes quite prominent, I should say. Brain is not working at this time. I'm just reviewing this one a little bit after midnight as my bedtime beer. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the kind of malty, adjuncty side of this beer in terms of its aroma. On the hoppy side of things, the Imperial Stout is of course not the most hoppy style of beer anyway, but you get a little bit of hoppy character out of this one. Maybe they've used a wee bit of Galena in this or something, because you know Galena is a popular hop to use in these big Imperial Stouts. But for me, you've got a little touch of smooth earthiness in there. So yeah, a little bit of smooth earthiness. You've got some nice herbal character, a little bit of floral aromaticity, a little bit of light grassiness, but you know, those green component notes that I'm mentioning to you there, they really take a bit of a back seat to a lot of the other stuff that's going on in this beer. So yeah, a little bit of hoppy complexity to the beer, but not overly much, I have to say. On the fruity side of things then, just to round off the aroma, for me, yeah, the fruity side of this beer, it's quite straightforward. You've got a little bit of this kind of pruny, plummy sort of thing. There's a wee bit of a kind of like black curranty note that comes out of this one. So yeah, a little bit of black currant, a little bit of fig, and then yeah, black currant, figs. I don't know if I'd really say much more than that. Yeah, black currant and figs. Maybe a little bit of juicy plum coming out of this one as well. So yeah, the way that pieces together in this one is really, really nice. A very interesting aroma, quite unusual when you think about the sort of stereotypical things you should get from an Imperial Stout. And it's certainly not, even if you think about the more kind of modern and popular pastry stouts, this one really isn't quite as sweet as some of those, I have to say, either. The one thing I don't like about these modern pastry stouts is some of them have that kind of granola type flavour and aroma. Some of them have that really kind of very, very sweet marzipan-y type note to them that I just never took to either. But yeah, this one certainly isn't like that. It is more like a kind of mix of a vanilla milk chocolate sponge type thing. So yeah, as I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But yeah, I think we can have a taste of this one now and see what it's all about. So this one is the Pulut Hitam, a 10% Imperial Stout based on an Indonesian dessert from the wonderful Sunbird Brewing Company in Mandai, Singapore. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, really very smooth and very, almost very chilled Imperial Stout actually. I think a lot of people would probably place this one in the Imperial Stout, in the pastry stout category. That's where I was going with that. Brain fart again. I can see, like, a lot of people I think would place this in the pastry stout category, which to a degree it would fit, but it's certainly very, very different from any pastry stout that I've come across on the channel before. But as I say, that's a style that I almost tend to avoid a little bit because they're always kind of hit or miss. And I like the more old school RISs and you know, the Imperial coffee stouts and the Imperial milk stouts and stuff like this. But yeah, this is one, as I say, that I tried and I thought it was really very, very nice. It's a lot smoother and brighter than I remember it being on tap as well, actually, but still very, very nice beer, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. I think Sunbird have done a nice job with this. So yeah, let's break this beer down then and describe the flavour for you a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So, middle third of your palate, you can feel the backbone of this beer. It has a little bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired black malty character. That is the backbone. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, there's a little touch of like woodiness comes out of this one. On top of that kind of black malty character, you've got a wee touch of like a almost slightly woody, crackery sort of layer there. But then yeah, the next layer up, and this beer is very, very layered in its flavour. The next layer up is like the edge. It's like that sort of chocolate, it's like the edge of a sponge cake, you know, the bit that's attached to the baking tray. It's very, very much like that. So you get a mix. The next layer is like a mix of like a vanilla, chocolate, coconutty sponge. And I think you get more and more of the coconut coming out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, that sort of sponge cakey layer that you have is quite interesting. So it feels like a mix of like a chocolate vanilla sponge, but the coconut becomes more and more prominent in this beer the more that you drink of it. I'm finding that this one, it's got quite a sweet character to it, but it's actually quite a dry sweetness that comes out of this one, and I like that. This is a beer that's very much kind of growing on me. It's not quite as sweet as I remember it being, actually, from locality, but it's a lot more sort of savoury in a sense. I remember it having a good little bit of sweetness, but I also remember it having a wee bit more kind of roasty, toasty bitterness too. So this is quite an interesting, it really is quite an interesting mix of things going on in this one. So yeah, lots of food for thought in this particular beer, I have to say. But yeah, you've got that sort of sponge cakey layer that I was talking about. Above the sponge cake, you do get a little bit of a kind of chocolatey character to this one. So the chocolatey character in this beer is on a bit of a spectrum. You have a wee bit of yeah, you certainly have a little bit of I would say more dark chocolate. It's mostly a milky chocolate, but there's a wee bit of like a sort of 50-60% darker chocolate character. You might remember that more sweet flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. So on top of that kind of chocolate spongy layer, you've got the chocolate character itself. So at the back of that middle third of your palate, you have a wee bit more of a kind of higher percentage cocoa chocolate, like 60% or something. But as you move further forward, it becomes more like a sort of 40% milky chocolate, and you get wee elements of vanilla out of that as well. Above all of that, there are some brown sugary characters coming out of this one. And yeah, the brown sugary characters kind of, it's almost like a bit, like above the chocolate, you've almost got like a circle of like a kind of butterscotchy type sweetness out of this one. So yeah, that kind of lingers there into the aftertaste, and you can feel in the dead centre of your palate, there is like this kind of really oily sort of sweet rice character coming out of this one. It does have a wee bit of like a stronger brown sugary note, but that is the alcohol coming out of this one. Just the way that this beer shows all of its flavours for me is very, very different compared to a number of Imperial stouts that I've come across before. And the other thing you'll notice on that middle third of the palate is that the further into the aftertaste you go, you're going to get more of these kind of like oat flake porridgey type flavours out of this one. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting kind of crazy stuff going on in the middle third of your palate with this beer. So yeah, a lot of food for thought with this one, but I think at this point we've covered the middle third of the palate then. So let's go on to the back third of the palate and describe that a little bit. As I've often said, the back third of your palate will give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of that kind of bready build up in there, and the base, there is a wee bit of like a wholemeal brown bread, but then above that you get more of a kind of like sponge cake, you know, and you get a little bit of the coconutty flavours and the kind of chocolatey notes as well. But the base of that back third of your palate, you get a bit more of that roasty, toasty, well-fired black malt in this one. You get a wee bit more of the crackery layer. There is a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready layer in there, which was a little bit lighter, a little bit more airy and a wee bit more taller. And then you also have the kind of chocolate sponge character coming out of this one. And as I said before, that chocolate spongy layer that's in there has a wee bit of vanilla, it has a lot of coconut to it, and then yeah, you've got those kind of slightly roasty, cocoa nibby type notes. But what you can feel on top of all of that is you can certainly feel some of the it's almost like a more roasty, charred chocolate character that just goes over the top of that on the back third of the palate, and that is everything on the malty side with the back third of the palate. Above all of that, of course, you've got the more yeasty flavour. So let's have a wee look at those yeasty notes that are coming out of this beer. So yeah, the yeasty side of this beer for me, it's quite interesting. So at the centre of that yeasty character, you can feel there's more of a it has a little bit of an almost kind of rye bready type quality. Then as you move further out from it, it's more of a kind of lighter wholemeal bready sort of thing, and then the edge of it is like a really toasty like black roasty toasty well fired bread crust. So all of that sits in the yeasty character above the malty side of that back third of the palate. But definitely, yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I think that covers the malty side, the malty and yeasty side of this beer. Let's go on to the hoppy side of things. So as I mentioned earlier, Imperial Stouts are not the most hop forward style of beer. And this one, certainly, when I think about all the Imperial Stouts I've had, this is certainly not the most hop forward Imperial Stout either. But yeah, it doesn't mean, doesn't take anything away from the beer, of course, but yeah, you certainly have a little bit of hoppy character in this one, which gives you that wee bit of complexity. So in the back corners of the palate, you do have a little touch of earthiness in there, and as you move further forward, the earthiness just kind of smoothens out a wee bit. There's a little bit of herbal character as well, and as you push further forward toward the front corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of a more kind of floral aromatic sort of thing, and it's very mild actually, but round the front curve of the tongue there's a little bit of a kind of lighter grassy sort of note to the beer as well, and it's quite a wet grassiness as well, I would hasten to add. But yeah, that's the green component. Let's go on to the front third of your palate to round off the tasting section. So yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of the bready build up in there. You've got the kind of brown wholemeal bread in the base and the sort of spongy type thing, and the coconut particularly on top. The base of that front third of your palate, a little bit of the roasty toasty well fired bread crust, wee bit of the cracker, then the kind of brown bready and sponge cakey type layers. Then above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll the way out of the beer. So let's look at that fruity side of things just to round off. I would say in that front third of your palate as well, the border region between front and middle third of your palate, you get a lot of the coconut, a lot of the coconutty side of this beer is coming out. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, it's not too much fruitiness, it's actually very straightforward in a way. So maybe at the back of that front third of your palate, yeah, you get a wee bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness. Underneath that, a little bit of a sort of datey type note. But yeah, as you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, it's definitely like big, quite rich figgy characters. There's a wee bit of like sort of blackberry and stuff like that into the front half of the front third of your tongue. But yeah, raisin, plum, date underneath, fig, a wee bit of blackberry. These are all kind of typical things that you would expect of the style. It's kind of, the more that I drink of this beer, the more it really becomes like a pastry stout, this one. So yeah, it's quite interesting actually. I do remember this beer being a little bit drier and a little bit more kind of bitter and things than it is, but yeah, I get quite a lot of this. I think it must be from whatever the brown sugar is. What is it, the Gula Malaba? And this one, it really, the brown sugary notes you get out of this one, it's like an almost almondy, like an almond pecan type Werther's Original type flavour. That really lingers in the middle of the palate with this one. So yeah, that's a lingering dry sweetness that you get out of this beer, along with a bit of the bread crusty note. But I think at this point we can round off the review and go on to the mouthfeel. But yeah, this is quite a more savoury and slightly drier sweet Imperial pastry stout. Actually, is definitely a pastry stout, this one, rather than anything else. But yeah, let's round off the review, as I said, with a wee look at the mouthfeel. And this is quite interesting because I actually find this very light for an Imperial stout. So yeah. So yeah, this beer for me, it's kind of mid-body, maybe pushing toward the top end of mid-body, but very light for an Imperial stout. It has a little bit of a slickness to it, and like I said, you get a lot of dryness out of this beer into the aftertaste, and yeah, it gives you that more kind of sponge cakey, pastry type dryness as well. So it's quite interesting from that perspective. In terms of the IBU of this beer, I think this one's maybe about 30-ish IBUs, but like I say, in the malt base, there's a lot of dryness there. You've got the kind of the toasty well-fired bread crust, the cracker, the sort of cake edge to this one. But yeah, it's very, very dry, this beer overall. So yeah, this beer really has this very big sort of dry sweetness to it, I would say, in the malt base. It becomes more pastry stout like the more that you drink of it. The hoppy character in this one, there's a wee bit of floral note in there, mainly an earthy herbal note and a little bit of grassiness. But then yeah, you've also got that sort of fruity note coming out of this one too, which is a little bit sharp in the beginning, but it mellows out and becomes very light and juicy the further into the aftertaste that you go. But all in all, a really interesting beer, this one, but certainly a lot more savoury and like dry and sweet than what I remember it being when I tried it at locality. So yeah, interesting stuff. That's safe to say with this one. So if you like a kind of dry, smooth pastry stout, this is one that is going to be right up your street. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been really interesting to try. Yeah, you get more of the oily, ricey flavours out of it into the aftertaste too, which are quite interesting. But yeah, let's leave it there. This one was the Pulut Hitam, a 10% Imperial pastry stout from Sunbird Brewing Company in Mandai in Singapore. Once again, thank you for watching beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Sunbird as well. We will return to these guys in a couple of videos' time, I'm sure, to look at the other beers. But yeah, do give me some other Singaporean craft brewery recommendations, and we'll see about making those reviews happen as well. But until the next time, Slange Skål, cheers. Check out my social media, check out Sunbird's social media. Big thank you to the guys at Sunbird for making this review possible, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Slange Skål, cheers, and ciao just now.